Empower Black men to live extraordinary lives. Shatter the stereotypes. Power Black men, shatter the stereotypes. Power Black men to live extraordinary lives. Shatter the stereotypes. Shatter the stereotypes. Power Black men to live extraordinary lives.
Welcome to Shatter the Stereotypes, where the intention is to empower Black men to live extraordinary lives. This show is based on the simple idea that every Black man is capable of creating inner peace, dynamic health, great relationships, and financial abundance. Therefore, we provide insights and strategies to educate, motivate, and inspire Black men to reach their full potential and create the life of their dreams. So if you're ready for some high-octane motivation and inspiration that supports and empowers you to live the life you were born to live, get ready to shatter the stereotypes so you can build a life that lights you up and positively impacts the world. So now, let's shatter the stereotypes with your host, Coach Michael Taylor.
Hello and welcome to Shatter the Stereotypes, where the intention is to empower Black men to live extraordinary lives. You see, there's never been a shortage of Black male role models. There's only been a lack of exposure of those role models in mainstream media. So my intention is to showcase and highlight Black men who are doing amazing things in the world. And joining me today is a man who is doing just that. His name is Arjuna O'Neal, and he is the creator of Mind Elevation, which is a personal development coaching program. And he's also the founder of Share Necessities, which is a nonprofit bringing essential resources and skills to communities in need. So without further ado, let's welcome Mr. Arjuna to the show. How are you, Mr. Arjuna?
Oh, man, it's a blessed day. Pleasure to be here. Honor. I appreciate you, Michael, for this opportunity.
Right. Absolutely. So first of all, tell us about your name. I'm really curious about the name, what it means, origin. Give us a little background about that.
So my name comes from what is described as the Hindu text, or the Hindu Bible, if you wanted to break it down for people that may not understand. The Bhagavad Gita, it's considered Hinduism, but it falls, once you unpack the culture, the lineage, it falls under the Vedic tradition. And Arjuna is described as God's best friend in the Bhagavad Gita. And so they had a story, there's a dialogue. And so God in the Bhagavad Gita is considered Krishna, that's the name. And so Krishna is telling Arjuna about this battle that he has to undergo, which is like a parable or a metaphor for these times, fighting off the demons and the limiting beliefs, and going against people that have wronged us, that are close to us, and how to maintain a elevated consciousness through this whole journey. And so Arjuna was a spiritual warrior, an archer, and I was raised in that religion. My dad found the practice, introduced it to my mom. They got married, and then I was raised in that religion. They named me Arjuna.
Oh, nice. And I love that because, I spent the last 20, 25 years researching pretty much every major religion. And I know that I was brought up Baptist. And so to even mention another religion, is like sinful. You're going to go to hell for, reading another book. And I said, nah, I didn't buy into that. So right. Really fascinated by just all the different religions. And I think it's fascinating that you were named after that warrior, if you will, in the Hindu religion, because it speaks to who you are as a person, I believe. So I think that's very fitting that your parents chose that particular name. So before we jump into your work, though, let's start off with just a few icebreakers. So first of all, tell us where you're from.
I'm originally born and raised Detroit, Michigan, East Side.
Okay.
Motown.
Detroit. All right. So tell us a little bit about your family, whatever you feel comfortable sharing.
Family dynamics, interesting. Living on the east side of Detroit at the time, I was growing up. Motown was was banging. It was doing its thing. Our mayor, Coleman Young, the industry was thriving. I mean, everything was thriving, from the music to the automotive industry to the streets, that lifestyle. And my mother was a part of a family of 8, I think 8 or 9. She had 8 or 9 siblings. Her father grew up in the South, but he was incarcerated as a young boy, 12, for drinking from the white man's water fountain. And so the things that happened to him while he was a young man carried over to him being a parent and raising my mom and her siblings. And so you can only imagine all the different beliefs and things that were implemented. And then on my father's side, Christian, his father used to hang out with Martha Reeves and Diana Ross and all those artists back then. And then his mom, interesting, she's from that era as well, drinking. But so the family dynamics are pretty interesting. A lot of them just at the time was just moving through survival.
Sure. Yeah. So if you were trapped on an island for 30 days and you could only take one book with you, what book would you take?
Thinking about it now, The Four Agreements by Don Ruiz.
Oh, nice.
Don Miguel Ruiz. And why? Because I feel like those 4 agreements, have allowed me so much opportunity to always see myself, to stay in the deeper inquiry of self.
Yeah. And that book is so powerful. So for those of you who are watching this and you have no idea what the 4 agreements are about, you want to share those 4 agreements?
Yeah. So there's, don't take anything personally, right? Always do your best. And then the other 2,
don't assume anything.
Don't assume. Yeah, don't assume. And then there's what's the 4? Because I have them on my I'm not home, but I have on my poster. And then there's don't assume, don't take nothing personal, always do your best. And what's that 4th one?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember too. I'm drawing a blank. It's been a while since I've read it. But anyway,
that's what,
find the book. It's called The 4 Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. It's a powerful read. You want to make sure you get it. Now, do you like movies?
I do.
Name a movie that you like. Tell me why you like it.
Oh man, interesting. I would always watch Scarface growing up.
Okay.
And I know, when you first think about it, yes, Scarface. He was a drug cartel leader. But what I found compelling about Scarface, I related to his pain. I related to his self-sabotage. Right. I related to how he masked his hurt in a way that the world saw him as a gangster, as a savage. But deep down, I related to his woundedness, his hurt inner child.
Wow, well, that's powerful. That's an interesting view on that movie, because like I said, I believe movies are just metaphors for life. Yeah. And movies can teach us so much about ourselves if we're willing to look deeply enough, into those movies. And the fact that you were able to pull that out of that movie just tells me how self-introspective you are, which is a good thing to have. Now, as a man who happens to be Black, are you optimistic or pessimistic about the future in general?
I like to lean toward the optimistic, only because the experiences that I've been able to create, despite the stories, despite the hardship of being in a melanated skin suit. Definitely there's challenges, but there's also, I'm here, right? And we'll get into that. So.
Got it. Optimistic guy. So
yeah,
I wrote a book called The Cure for Onlyness, a Black man's guide to joy, passion, and purpose. And the book addresses the feeling of onlyness that we as Black men feel sometimes when we're the only person of color in certain environments. And I'm sure you've been there. So how do you deal with that?
I love it, to be honest. You know, for years it was an issue. It was always a topic, you know, and I started noticing how it was so common amongst Black men to have these, when we'd have these conversations, we'd be in these spaces, and you know, we would share, and it was like, yeah, you know, in the work that I get to do and the practices that I have, practicing yoga, meditation, eating holistic, you know, organic produce, all the different essential herbs and things like that. When I dove into that lifestyle practice, it wasn't people that looked like me.
Right.
I had to leave my communities. I had to leave my spaces, you know, that I was comfortable in. And so when I would come back, I'm like, man, I'm always the only brother in the room. I'm always the only brother that's shopping in the store. And I started thinking about it. And I was like, man, there's something here, right? There's something here. If I'm the only brother that's always in these spaces, but I also know where I want to go with my life. I also know what my purpose is now that I want to change these narratives. I said, well, don't see it as a bad thing. I said, now the spotlight is on you. All these white people get to see you, but also know that there's the stereotypes, which you said, what mainstream media does not show white America. So I said, you get to be the example. They get to learn a new way about Black culture, Black men, through the way you show up, your presence, how you hold yourself, your posture, your smile, everything about you, the way you move, your energy. And once I tapped into that and owned that, and not from a place of, you know, shoulders curled over and, oh, I'm just the only Black guy. It changed the way they welcomed me into the space. It changed the way I held the space. And they got to see a different version of a Black man, which was intriguing. Now it's like, hold on.
Yeah.
You're different.
Yeah. And so, you know, most of my life, similar experience. And matter of fact, my very first book I wrote back in 1995, 94 actually. And the very first chapter was called the "That's What White People Do" mentality. And in the book, I talked about how most of my life, you know, my friends called me a sellout because I used to surf, right? only brother on the beach surfing, right?
Yeah.
You know, brothers talked about, you know, I'm talking like a white guy. You know, we've all had those conversations. But it's important, as you mentioned, because I, like yourself, I'd go to these workshops, these seminars, and I'd always be the only brother in the room.
Yeah.
And I said, you know, and it's sort of, I had an experience that kind of clicked because I realized that it was the universe's way of giving me the knowledge and the wisdom to take back to men who look like me.
Yeah.
See, so I can see the divine purpose in all of it, right? So I never felt really rejected by the Black community. I felt a little different, but I didn't feel rejected. But I knew that I had some insights and information that could support and empower Black men. And I see the divine process in all of it, of why all my life I've carried this weight of being the only Black person in so many environments. For example, I worked for this company. I was the youngest manager in the history of the company, and only one of two Black male managers in the history of this 87-year company. And so I was exposed to this whole idea of being the only Black person for most of my life. And I've always seen it as an advantage because I've never saw it as a disadvantage. I said, because my mom used to always tell me, when you walk in the room, show up in a way that you own that room.
Yeah.
She said, just show up. She said, you just be you. Don't worry about them. Just show up in a way that people pay attention. So I've always seen myself sort of as a representative, if you will, you know, for black folks. Like, I want to shine my light so that white folks can say, oh, damn. That's who we are. Yeah. So now tell us a little bit about your MBA. So what were your initial career goals with your MBA?
So, you know, the lifestyle that I had led growing up on the east side of Detroit, and we'll get into that one, but the lifestyle that I had led, right, leading up to a certain point in my life, I knew I needed a few stripes from white America, right? I had earned all my street stripes. My street cred was good. I was solid. But in this optimism of change, growth, being this new version of myself, being this example to white people or people that just didn't look like me, to give them a different context. I know how degrees, titles, certifications hold a certain merit. And so also I needed to learn how people think in those Oval Offices or in those cubicles, the people that call the shots. I needed to learn their language. How do they function? How do they think? Again, I knew how the streets worked, but I'm changing, right? I'm growing out of that. So I'm going into a world where people do things professionally, morally, noble, so to speak. And so I went back to school also to teach myself a certain level of discipline, a certain way of carrying myself, a certain way of speaking, right? How do I change my energy if I've only learned it one way? You know, how can I be the chameleon? How can I adapt? So I had to learn. And so I went to school actually just to show that I had the mindset and the discipline, but also the distance. I could go the distance, right? Because usually, you know, it's like, oh, that's a season. Right? Oh, once he gets madder, he'll go back. Or once things don't work out, he'll go back to his old ways. So my program was like 6.5 years. Stayed committed, graduated, and then created from that. And also, it was for me to show myself that I had what it took to reprogram the stories, right?
Yeah.
Because when that resistance kept showing up, you know, it was like, well, what are you gonna do with the resistance, Arjuna? How can you channel it? How can you curb it?
Got it. Nice. Now, where'd you go to school?
So I did my first year. I did the University of Phoenix. I did on campus, and then the rest of the program I did online. I was moving around, trying to sort out my family dynamics and things of that nature.
Gotcha. So, when you were a kid in Detroit, what did you dream of becoming? Did you have a dream of what you saw yourself as?
Interesting, because I grew up in the Hare Krishna faith. So that's a completely different culture. That's an Indian culture.
Right.
And at that time, we were like the third or second Black family. So again, I'm in a space, I don't see anybody that really looks like me. This culture didn't match what I was seeing on the east side of Detroit. It didn't match my family dynamics. Right? I'm eating food that doesn't look like anything I'm seeing at the family cookouts, at the barbecues. I'm going to school with food that nobody can relate to. So I'm always the spectacle. It was always a joke. It was always something. So all that just over time, it made me hate my life. It made me angry because I was always a spectacle. You know, my mom's dressed up. You know, she wore the Indian attire. So on Sundays we would go to the temple. It's an Indian version of a church where we would pray. But my dad and my mom split when I was a baby, when I was 1, and so she didn't know how to drive. She didn't drive, so we caught the bus everywhere. So can you imagine being a Black? You know, me and my little sister, we at the bus stop. My mom dressed up in what people thought was sheets, all these different colors on it, and it was, you know, sparkly, and it drew a lot of attention. And she got her hand in the bag. They, you know, one of the things they do, they chant mantras, but they keep their hand covered in the bag. So the neighborhood kids, everybody looking at us. I dreaded Sundays. I hated it. You know, and the hairstyle was different. You know, they wore their head shaved with the little, what they would call a ponytail in the back. Mm-hmm. So I'm a little Black boy with a shaved head with this ponytail in the middle of the back of my head.
Wow.
So childhood was painful. It was painful because I didn't know how to explain them to anybody.
Yeah.
And then no one talked to me in the religion about what was really going on, how it applied to my lifestyle. So I'm like, Mom, what's going on? Like, what are we? What is this?
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, we're gonna jump into that too in a minute. So you were recognized as a nonviolence peace ambassador by the city of Los Angeles. So tell us a little bit about what that's about.
Uh, Interesting. So the organization, the leader, the founder of that organization, was moving into different states that had a high crime rate. Chicago, Detroit, LA. LA being a big one, because a lot of influence. If you can create things in LA, New York, you get more eyes on what you're doing. And so I guess from what he told me, he was doing his research, and he found me, the work that I was doing, because the nonviolence peace, the organization is Cities for Peace, and meditation is one of the fundamental practices that they teach. Again, so being a man of color, that there's not a lot of us in that field, I came up at the top of the list. So he reached out and he's like, "Hey, man, you don't really have too many Black men doing this type of work." He's like, "I'm interested. I'd love to share with you this opportunity to, be a part of this program." So when he came, I invited him down to South Central. I have a community center, South Central. Like, it was like 6 to 7 minutes from Nipsey Hussle's Marathon store, but on the opposite side. And so he came, and I just gave the law of the land, like, "Hey, this is how you see it, but let me show you how it works." And we came up with an agreement, because again, I was raised in a culture. He was Indian, by the way. His
Ah,
philosophy, and his philosophy came from the teachings of Gandhi.
gotcha. Okay.
And so I was like, "Hey, let me give you a little backstory on how y'all think. How I've experienced Indian culture and the way Indians come into Black communities with certain narratives, and this whole idea of just, I'll bring meditation and people will be at peace." I said, "But you need to understand how this is built, right? How this system is designed and structured in order for you to come in here talking about just meditating and people will have this peaceful, serene life." So long story short, I took what he had and what I knew and understood and the experiences that I had learned from just running a nonprofit on the front lines, is what they call it, of one of the, this particular area was considered a very violent, high crime in South Central. And so I took my practices of what I knew from yoga, meditation, and how I did my inner work and journey, and we combined that, and then they ended up allowing me to teach and work with the LAPD, because I had a different narrative than what he had. Gave him a little more insight, and so from that, the attention that we dropped the homicide rate 40% over a certain amount of time, and it brought attention from the local 77th Division Police Department. And they were like, "Well, what are you guys doing? What's your secret?" And so from that, it brought some exposure, and you know how that goes.
Outstanding. Outstanding. So I've come to believe that there are only two things that will cause a man to want to change and begin what I'll call that inner journey of transformation. One is pain, and the other is what I call divine discontent. So, what triggered you to begin your inner journey? Was it your NDE, or what? How did you get involved in this inner growth, inner transformational process?
It's, if I, to really hit the nail on the head, Michael, for me, I was sexually abused as a little boy, right? Growing up in this practice. At the time, my mother had dedicated her life to being a Hare Krishna devotee, and the requirements of that was almost as if, the way I see it now, looking back, was as a Black woman without a husband. There were some stereotypes. There were some things that just didn't sit right, and her being a single mom and not having that protection, she fell into the throes of the philosophy of what the belief system that they bestowed upon her. And as children was me. I have a sister a year younger than me and a brother a few years older than me. We were left for ourselves to fend for ourselves, right? She was always busy serving the Lord, just like in a Christian church. You got services throughout the week, choir rehearsal, bake sale. It's how it goes, and we
Absolutely.
committed. So just different context, but same. And there was a babysitter, it was twin sisters. It was about, I think, 4. So they had, done things to me, molested me, and I tried to speak up, and they poisoned me. I was one of those kids that was active, always into stuff, like ADHD, whatever you want to call it, very hyper, always meddling with things. So they just used my behavior as a way to make it look like I had gotten myself into some very harmful chemicals. And they forced me to drink some paint thinner, the stripper that you put. So it ate away at my esophagus. And I'll bring this all to how it all works, but the chemicals ate at my esophagus. They left me for dead in the floor. Their older brother happened to come home and find me. Rushed me to the hospital, just enough time for them to save me. So the journey started there, right?
Wow.
The pain, the stories of and then growing up in the temple, there was they have what they call like ashrams. So if you're familiar with any of the like Buddhist or culture, or dojos like martial arts where they have the big ashrams where they have all the students train practice. So that's where they would put all the kids while the parents would work full time doing things to maintain the temples and keep the monies coming in to keep it functioning. And so they had teachers in these different ashrams. They had the girl side and the boy side. And these were people, they didn't vet them. They just let people join. They didn't know their background. There was no real deep, like now we have the DOJ where if you work with kids, you got to get your fingerprints, and they didn't have none of that protocol. Just, hey, I'm here to be one of you guys. And so trusting people that were hurt, pain, and that's what they did. So many kids were being raised, I was physically abused, beaten, emotionally abused. Sometimes they would starve me. Sometimes they wouldn't allow me to see my mother on the weekend when they would let the parents come and see the kids. They always had a story. Eventually, my mother was like, all right, this got to change. But I went through a few years of that on top of the other abuse. So now, moving forward, my mother finally left. And at the time, we moved to a temple that was in West Virginia from Detroit. They sent her from Detroit, told her to go to this temple. They were trying to build a whole community in West Virginia that was similar to like the whole Waco, Texas.
Yeah, David Koresh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Something like, just to give you a little context, there's books about it. Monkey on a Stick. If anybody ever was like, well, wanted to look into some of the upbringing, that was my story as a child. And so then we went back to Detroit, where my father, at the time, when he married or met my mother, he never had told her that he was part of one of the biggest drug eras in the 80s in Detroit. So we go back, life is booming on his end, and he's still practicing this faith, this religion, but he's also figuring out how to use it to his demise and tie it into the lifestyle. Like, hey, look, Monday through Saturday, we move bricks. Sunday, we offer it to God, and it's a blessing, right? But all I knew at the time, I always just wanted to be around my father. I always wanted to have a relationship. I had older brothers from different mothers, and I was the youngest. So I took all that pain, all that misunderstanding, and I needed an outlet. So whatever my dad put in front of me, I was like, well, figure it out. And so that's why Scarface, the lifestyle, and that's where it all came in, right? So, but what happened was, now when they poisoned me, the poison hit the throat. So I don't know, if you're familiar with the throat chakra, the voice. our voice, being able to speak, is a game changer in anything that you're trying to do. Healing, growth, self-inquiry, deeper work. That's why they use the term finding your voice. But that had hindered me, stopped me for a long time, from blocking me from speaking up, from owning certain parts of myself.
Mm.
And so,
Yeah, and thank you for that vulnerable share, because as Black men, I know how difficult it is to talk about things like sexual abuse, sexual assault. We tend to kind of push that under the rug and hide behind religion and all this kind of stuff. And I was raped by a female cousin, which created a lot of shame that I carried for years, years and years. And, we in our culture, in this sexually driven culture, from a male perspective, like, what do you mean that was rape, man? You just got to get you some, right? But we don't talk about the trauma, the emotional trauma, because I was like 10, right?
Yeah.
So it's important that we have these dialogues
Yes.
as Black men to recognize that that's not okay. And
Yeah.
you may pretend to be okay. If
Yeah.
you haven't done your work, which we're going to talk about here in a minute, if you haven't done your work, rest assured, if you remember any of those types of experiences from your youth and you haven't healed those areas of your life, I can assure you, it's impacting your life negatively. So with that being said, though, Arjuna, you had an experience that I don't think I've ever heard a Black person talk about, which is an NDE, near-death experience. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. And so fast forward, that pain that you spoke on, that, because I remember I used to, growing up, living the street life, I used to always reference, oh man, I've been getting oral sex since I was a little boy, not hearing, not even understanding. Like, whoa, you are a little cute, you are a child. Like everything about that, nothing about that is cool. Everything about that is destruction. It's destruction.
Right.
Prematurely exposed to things that my body wasn't even ready for. So when I'm sharing it, but you're among some young men who were all wounded. We out here on the block doing the things that we're doing. It was what we highlight. It was glamorized, so to speak. Like it became cool, and
right.
I kept saying it, and I kept saying it. And then one day I said it. I used to try to date older women. I used for some reason I had this attraction to older women. I didn't understand why either. And so one day I had a conversation with this older woman. I told her, just said it like I would say it loosely with the homies, and I was like, yeah, I've been getting oral sex, since. And she said, whoa, wait, stop me. And gave me this look, like with tears in her eyes for the first time. And she mirrored it back to me the way I had never had anybody say it. Like, damn, baby, like, no, that's not okay. And then she started mirroring back certain things that I was doing, the way I my behavior. And when she did was she put it all into a context. So for the first time, Michael, I'm like, whoa, like I'm fucked up.
Mm-hmm.
This explains why I'm chasing these type of women. This is explaining why I have this disconnect and why I can't do certain things, or why I'm not able to speak a certain way or just carry myself a certain way when I'm around women. So all that to say that awareness made me feel even more shame, more guilt. Now I'm feeling like a sucker, right? Because I'm like, but I know because she's exposed it to me. I've done my research, but now I'm on the block. Like, hold on, here I am. I'm carrying 2 pistols. I got a whole team, right? I'm Scarface to a degree, but I got this story underneath it. That at night I feel like a coward, and so I knew that so in the religion, suicide was something that was considered evil, right? It was a bad thing. And I never had the courage to hurt myself like that. But I had no fear to go on some of the most dangerous areas of the East Side
Mm.
and put myself in death's
Yeah.
path.
Wow.
So I started looking at all this. I said, well, I was hurting so bad. I said, you know what? Everybody gonna pay. My dad, and so I realized that my dad was taking advantage of all of his sons. We were just his workers. So I'm like, you just doing another version of what the temple was doing to my mom and all these other people, right? Um, so when I realized what he was doing, watching Scarface, I broke the ultimate street code. I went to the higher ups, right? I went out of the chain of command, the protocol. I reached out to his supply because I wanted him to feel what I was feeling. And I knew that was like the ultimate in the game. I knew that was like the ultimate no-no. Right? And so when he found out, he called my mom, you know, I pulled up on her actually in front of the temple. One Sunday he pulled up, he says, I'm gonna kill your son, talking about me. So he put a hit out of him. And when I found out that he had done that, he actually had one of my older brothers who was supposed to order it all out to make it all happen. And my older brother was like, wait, what? Like, hold on. Like, but he had so much fear in us because what we saw, how we do the things that we were exposed to, we were, so it was like, you didn't listen, you might come up missing yourself. So all that to say is, at that point, I had no cap as far as the way I let my pain, my emotions, the imbalance, all that be exposed to the point where I ended up in a situation, long story short, where I was involved with a woman. Now, this piece I never really speak on, but the nature of this podcast and what you bringing forth, I feel it's extremely important to share this. So, as a Black man, being taught that women were just objects and supposed to, especially in the game, just to carry out my will. All I was supposed to do, we were supposed to have sex and, I'll give you some money, whatever. But I was so emotionally disconnected that this woman was hurting. She didn't come from that lifestyle. I actually brought her into my world. I was selling weed out of her house, turned her house into one of my dope houses, my stash spots. And I stayed out one night and came back in the next day. And she said, "Oh, you was out with another one of your little females." And I'm like, "No." But at the same time, in the game, you never told where to pick up in the drop spot because, watching the movies, the Scarface, that's how people got busted. So I was like, "Look, I can't give you that information." She didn't understand that. So she thought I was lying. So I said, "You know what?" At that point, I was just like, "Fuck it." Yeah, that's what I was doing. I did that. Matter of fact, I said some of the stupidest. I don't know what made me say that. I said, you can still smell her on my fingertips.
Wow.
And in that moment, that's kind of like her response was, "Wow, like really?" And I didn't even catch it. I was so disconnected from myself. That's why you see the shirt that talks about heart power. I had no connection to my actual physical human beingness. I knew I was alive in this body, but I didn't feel. I was so, from all those years of just numbing and separating as much as I can. So she said, "Well, nigga, I will kill you." I said, "Well, shit, you know what a pistol it don't miss." Didn't think about, wait, Arjuna, you put them hollow point tips in there that can go through the Teflon vest. Uh, and you give her permission to go grab this gun. It didn't hit me to after the fact. So she went and got the gun. It was a 38 snub nose Saturday night special. Everybody know that's why the police always carry as a backup. That's a bad boy. The caliber. So she pointed at my head. She was about 10 feet away from me. I looked down the barrel of the gun, and then in that moment, I was like, "Oh, this is it. Freedom. If she a clean shot, it's a wrap. Cool." At this point, I was like, hell, I done had all the money. I done got the stories in the strip clubs. I done had all the lap dances. I done bought the cars. I done did all that, you know. So I'm like, this Scarface, this is how we're going to go out.
Mm.
God had a different plan. When she saw that I was so disconnected, so ice cold, she looked at me. She just, in that moment, she felt compassion. She was like, man, you need help. So she went to lower the gun, but didn't know how to uncock it. And somehow when she hit it just went off. But when it went off, it kicked back up, hit me in the femoral artery, severed the femoral artery in the right leg. I bled out like one of the movie, the soldier movies. I remember at the time, Saving Private Ryan. Now I was always an A student in school, smart, educated. So I knew from anatomy class that this wasn't like in the movies. I said, this ain't one of them little flesh wounds. And the way I was bleeding, blood was just, it was like the ketchup bottle. You just squeeze it, you could hear it just, and it was just spraying. And so in that moment, I remember I looked at it, I said, damn, actually we could have talked about this because I didn't die, right? So so now that I ain't dead, because I thought it was gonna be a clean, it was a wrap. But because I'm not dying, I'm dying slow. So now I'm like, oh, wait, this ain't gold according to the way I foreseen it. So, but it just started working. Like the brain started working different. And I knew from having the exposure to meditation way early on from the religion and the practices, from growing up, I was like, oh shit, the heart rate. I was like, I got to slow my heart rate down to slow this bleeding down. Because
Wow.
if I am going to live, right?
And you had the awareness in that moment.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, because I said, this shit ain't like the movies.
Right.
You don't have time to, I'm like, Mike, I told myself, I said, Arjuna, you don't have time to be shoulda, coulda, woulda, right? You missed that window. Now it's time to where your soldier at now, where that gangster at now. So I put my finger in the bullet hole, in the wound, to try to stop the bleeding. So, and then I ripped my shirt off to kind of use that. But underneath, I had this tattoo. So in the Hindu symbolism of God, there's a tattoo called the Om symbol that represents all creation, God. And so I saw it. Sweat was coming out of my chest, and the tattoo the size of quarters. I was bleeding. I was so hot, I was burning. But the tattoo reminded me, oh, pray, like read. And so the whole teaching of the Bhagavad Gita is, what do you do at the time of death? Like, so you can read the Bible, you can read the Bhagavad Gita, know all these scriptures, but the most important, what do you do when it's your calling at the time of death? Do you remember these teachings? Or do you panic? Right? And so in that moment, I was like, oh, I'm remembering God. So I'm excited. But at the same time, the excitement has caused my heart rate to, so now I'm bleeding. And then in that moment, God spoke to me, revealed. And I remember saying, I went from like the most extreme heat, the most extreme pain. Michael, I understand why people give up. It's the pain level that you can't even comprehend. And the body just wants to shut down. So the mind abandoned me. The mind panicked. So I know we talk about mindset. Mind left me. Ran. Oh, you about to die, brother. Oh shit, we can't take this. It's too much. I'm out. But because I had lost so much blood now, and I was losing so much blood as the seconds were going, as time was going, the heart had to work overtime. So the heartbeat started hitting. It started hitting the back of my chest so hard, like boom, boom. And I heard it. It cut through all the noise. And I was like, shit, wait a second. If your heart's still fighting for you, like the mind gone, but your heart's still fighting, you can't give up now, bro. Wow. Heart power. So the heart reminded me, keep going, keep fighting. So I did. It brought me back. And so God, show me myself, show me my purpose, show me, and told me, reminded me, he said, remember this conversation. Because when you go back into your body, they're going to tell you everything contrary to this. And I was like, are you sure, God? I'm like, look at me. I'm on the floor. I'm twisted up. The bullet, it had knocked me, spent me. My body's all like conflicted. And it's just so much blood. Like, I'm like, my God, I'm laying in it. I can smell it. I'm cooking it. The smell, I'm a vegetarian, by the way. So I'm trying not to earl off the smell of my flesh cooking. And I remember the paramedics came in. So that conversation just kind of like, it just withered away. Right. And then the paramedics came in and rolled me to check my prostate. So he stuck his finger in my rectum. And I never forget that. I was like, major violation, lost it. So now I'm arguing with the paramedic, and that last little bit of excitement emptied out the little bit of blood that was in me, and I coded. So they take me out of the scene. They take me out of the apartment before I got shot on a gurney covered up. So I made the breaking story of the news. Black male, again, the stereotypes. Black male, dope house, shot. I was dead. So when I left, the way they stood, they didn't do the follow-up. Oh, he made it. It was just dead man. So I played off of that. When I came back, when they saved me, 14 hours of surgery, all this and that, I was paralyzed from the waist down for a year. I played off of that. I said, this is my transition time. How do I use the Tupac story, right? How can I make this look cool on the streets in a way where I grab your attention, but then do what God asked me to do? And of course, it didn't happen right away. I had a lot of work to do from there. And but the one thing that people ask me, like, well, what is the one thing? What's the one thing that you learned from being shot? So in order for me to heal my body, to heal my mind, to heal just to if I wanted to live and do the work, I had to love myself. So I had to love the hurt little boy. I'm still working on the, the story behind being sexually abused, but I had to love myself. I had to love the pain. I had to love the circumstance. I had to love it all. And I had to forgive the person that shot me, forgive myself. That was the only way my body was going to be able to heal.
Yeah. So, wow, that's, I think about the perfection of the universe, right? So you can look at that story, and I'm just going to make an assumption here that you can now see the divinity in all of it.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So I wrote a book called Adversity is Your Greatest Ally, How to Use Life Challenges as Stepping Stones to Live the Life of Your Dreams. And in the book, I said, sometimes the universe has to take drastic measures to get our attention, right? Yeah. For me, it was a divorce. My divorce was that wake-up call that really challenged me to stop looking outside of myself and to be willing to look internally. And that journey, again, it was a journey of healing. It guided me first, to gain the courage to go to therapy, to start addressing some of the things that I was completely unaware of, because when I was 23 years old, I was living the American dream. I had the house, the wife, the 2.5 kids and all of that. And by society standards, Michael had made it. And in about a 6-year time frame, I lost everything. I was homeless for 2 years, living out of a car. And as I look back in retrospect, I can see the perfection in all of it.
Yeah.
I mean, if I had to do my life all over again, I wouldn't change a thing, because I can see the beauty and the perfection in all of it. So with that being said, so you have a coaching program that you support and empower men and women, I'm sure, to embrace this idea of the importance of healing. Now, we're talking in the context of Black men. And as Black men, we must be willing to talk about healing, forgiveness, growth. This is part of our transformation as Black men. And it's so critical that we have this conversation. Now, I want to read something from Iyanla Vanzant that you may be familiar with. And then I want to talk to you about your coaching program and how it applies. So it says, until you heal the wounds of your past, you are going to bleed. You can bandage the bleeding with food, with alcohol, with drugs, with work, with cigarettes, with sex, but eventually it will all ooze through and stain your life. So you must find the strength to open the wounds, stick your hands inside, pull out the core of the pain that is holding you in your past and the memories and make peace with them.
Yes.
I love, love, love that, because for me, as mentioned, I was successful, had done all the right things in society, but it wasn't until I started doing my inner work. And my saving grace was, I read a book by John Bradshaw called Healing the Shame That Binds You.
Mm-hmm.
And it was that book that opened my mind to the idea that my childhood trauma was still impacting my life as an adult.
Yes.
And in being willing to heal that trauma, I became free.
Yeah.
Emotionally, psychologically, spiritually. And it's a journey that I'm still on today.
Yeah.
I don't claim to have all the answers, but what I can say is, as a result of the work that I've done, the healing that I've done, I feel whole. I feel complete. I don't have to have titles and labels and accomplishments to love myself, right? So tell us a little bit about your coaching program and how it can support men. We're talking about men specifically.
Yes.
How it can support men in getting to that place of wholeness that I just mentioned, because it's available to all of us.
Yes.
But we got to be willing to do the work. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. Well, the work that I do is primarily focused on men of color, right? Black men, and then men of color, right? But open to whoever can benefit from the work. Now, you use that word, feel, right? Feel. And what I learned on my journey, I was always trying to actually feel. I wanted to feel. I wanted to feel what it was like to be, I'm a parent, I'm a father, right? I wanted to feel what it was like to actually be able to not just hug my kids, but what does it feel like to be a dad that really cares? Like, what does that hug feel like beyond just the physical, the feeling of it internally? And so family, my mother, my sister, my relationships, I always wanted to actually feel it, right? And without doing the work, without healing those parts of me, they were just experiences. They were like, there was the ideas.
Right?
Right?
In your head.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. And I talk about, there's the idea, and then there's the actual experience. Right. There's the idea of this attractive woman. I'm going to speak up. I'm gonna court her. I'm gonna take her out. But then there's the actual experience. Now, in the experience, this woman may mirror something back to me. She may mirror back a certain behavior or a certain mannerism of the woman that shot me. Right. And now, but this is a whole new person. May not even ever had the idea to even think that way. But because of the idea, I have a preconceived notion, the trauma body is activated. Now I'm in my sympathetic nervous system, right? Fight, flight, or survival. I've just created a whole story that has nothing to do with this moment. We out on a date, right? So sometimes the idea, and like what you said, what life will do is it will replay scenarios. But if you haven't healed the wounding from those old scenarios, you will create the story to make you right. Right? The mind will tell you whatever it needs to tell you to make it right, to make your pain right. And what you'll do is you'll create that because there's the, oh, I knew. And you ever hear that saying we always say, I knew that was going to happen. If that's the case, then if we had that much power, then why can't I say that about this 7-figure business or this house I want over here on top of the hill in Malibu, or this yacht? Oh, I knew, right? Notice how we can say that, oh, I knew that was going to happen, but why don't we use that, or why can't we use that? If that's such a powerful truth, then why doesn't that work in the things that we want in our lives? So what I'm trying to say is that I knew it was going to happen is in our hurt, in our trauma, because that's what we're familiar with. That's what we feel we have the power in our story, in our hurtness. That's where we become the victim. There's the victim, villain, or the sovereignty. Right? And also, I know when we talk about the childhood narrative, right? A lot of times we talk about the things that I saw as a child shapes us. But one narrative that we leave out is, what about the things you did not see as a child? Didn't see the hugs, didn't see the affection, didn't see the family dinner setting, things like that. So now that doesn't click to me. It's not a reality. So the work that I get to do is we get to the root so you can feel again, because I can't give you anything that I can't give myself. I can't show up for you in a way, Michael, or I can't even hold this interview in such a powerful way if I haven't looked at that within myself. Right? How can I use this story? See, it's a story, but see, I believe the story is still unfolding. So I no longer identify with story. I call it, these are my experiences. We're more than our feelings, our emotions, our trials and errors, our struggles. But can you detach from that to step outside of yourself and see the divinity in your life? To see that your wounding, your pain is actually someone else's medicine. But you got to get to that within yourself first.
Yeah.
Because that divorce that you mentioned could feel like that 38 snub nose.
Mm-hmm.
See, we get caught. We get caught into what it looks like on the outside. I tell people, yeah, in shot. But see, what I learned was I chose to stick to the NDE experience, the gunshot, because that sounded more masculine. That sounded more cool than leading with I was sexually abused.
Yeah, I see.
Right.
I see.
And so, but look what happens, though, Michael. By me taking that story and leading with it, like what you said, now I just keep sweeping it under the rug. And so, as men, we find that one story that, especially men of color, we find the story that sounds more masculine, more, and then we attach all these other different situations to it, right? And it carries over.
Yeah.
If you don't do the work, it's gonna follow you. It follows you. It follows you. And it just, so we ruminate in it, and I'll just say this last piece to it. I did 2 years in the county jail. And anybody that's been incarcerated that's listening, they know county is considered worse than prison in the sense of the freedom that you have. County, you're locked down. You don't have the pods, the dorms, a lot of movement. So, but I was on the pod with 500 men. And I was in a town that hated men from Detroit. I was in Flint, Michigan.
Oh, wow.
So it was like hyenas and the lion. And I said, you know what? I'm here. And there's 500 different versions of what a real man is right now. 500 versions of masculinity. I said, Arjuna, this is the same situation when we talk about being the only Black man in a white space. I said, you're going to be the only man who understands this heart power amongst all these men that are using the pain, the hurt to show up in these cells. I said, no, I can't be in prison twice. I'm not going to be trapped here and behind bars. I said, one of these is going to have to give.
Mm.
And that's where mind elevation started. I said, if it can work in what's considered the bottom, where the have-nots, where they throw us away, and you can break through. I started with men, just helping them feeling for the first time, so they can even see where the hurt was, to even take accountability, so they can forgive. Because when you learn, Michael, it ain't even about the people. It's not about nothing out there.
Right.
It's
Absolutely.
for you.
Yeah. Yeah. Because see, culturally, we have this idea, and we've all heard it or maybe said it. My mom and dad used to beat me and I turned out okay. Yeah, right. You're not okay. if you remember that beating and those traumas, I can assure you there's some healing that needs to take place. And until you do, you will not be okay.
Yeah.
So it's important that we have these conversations, and again, specifically for Black men, that it's okay to talk about this, because this is the only way you'll heal. Now, as Black,
And it's your life too. This is your experiences. You got to talk about it.
right. So that's why I created this forum, so that men like yourself we can have these dialogues, so that, because there's a man that's going to watch this and go, I get it. I get it.
Yeah.
So the whole conversation is about, it's possible for you, no matter what you may be going through, no matter what situation you may be in, there's a possibility that things can be much better and actually pretty extraordinary. But you have to be willing, first and foremost, to take 100% responsibility for your life turning out the way that you want it to. Yeah. You can't place blame on the media. You can't place blame on racism. All that stuff is real. But until you say, if it's to be, it's up to me, nothing will change. So if you've been inspired by this conversation and you're thinking about learning some tools that can support and empower you through whatever trauma you may be experiencing or may not even be aware of, Arjuna, I'd like to now give you an opportunity to tell people, how can they find out more about your program if they want to contact you?
Well, first of all, my website, Arjuna O'Neal, ArjunaOneal.com.
Okay.
I'm on Instagram, Arjuna_O'Neal. That's where the most two places that you can find me right now. And just to feel what you were saying and why this is so important. Because no, you can continue to blame. Right? You can continue to point the fingers. But me here, if anything I've said doesn't really land for you, what I want men to see is that I am sitting here as living proof of the possibilities. I was pronounced dead. Not only pronounced dead, I was sent home with a stack of papers saying that I wouldn't never walk again, and that I only would probably live 4 to 5 years due to the lifestyle of a brother who lives in the hood, who sold dope, da. All these stereotypes were already pushed on me. And so this is proof, that you can change all of it, that you don't have to carry it. And my thing is, if you're going to live in the pain and you're going to carry it, do something with it. Make something from it. That may be your business, right?
Yeah.
And there's nothing more beautiful as a Black man, right? To be able to be in your essence. Because one thing the world has shown me, this is what everybody's trying to get and tap into. The core essence of a melanated man. It carries so much value. It's like gold. It's like the wealth. So
yeah, and again, I too am living proof of what's possible. I mean, I'm a high school dropout, right? 11th grade education.
Yes.
Did all the corporate stuff and lost everything, was able to rebuild my life. So I know what's possible.
Yes.
But, there's a lot of people out there. For example, I started off the process with Anthony Robbins and the motivational stuff, walking on hot coals, that motivational stuff. But it wasn't until I did that inner transformational work, that healing, the John Bradshaw and the therapy, that's what really changed my life. So, because you can be motivated out of pain and your pain is what's driving you. What you want, I believe, what we all long for is what I'll call freedom, emotional freedom, the freedom to be who we are, not to hide behind the mask, not to pretend to be something that we're not, just that I know who I am. I love the skin that I'm in, and I'm blessed to be able to share who I am with the world. That's what we long for. And you can get there.
Yeah.
Will it be easy? No, not at all. But is it doable? Absolutely. Yeah. So you now have a resource, someone who, if you need some guidance, and you will need some guidance, you will need support, you will need some support and some people that can support and empower you. And I'm going to suggest or recommend that if you're thinking about anything we said today, and you're on the fence about where to start, I think a great place to start would be simply contacting Arjuna and saying, hey, look, I'm ready to get started. So again, you can find him on his website, arjunaoneal.com. There'll be a link below this video. You can click on a link. It'll take you right to his website, and you can begin that process. Okay, so it's doable for you. So Arjuna, as we wind down, I now want to give an opportunity just to kind of share your closing thoughts, final comments to the audience, whatever comes up for you.
You just dropped one, Michael. You dropped one that to me is right at the end. You dropped the bomb, and I gotta speak to it because you said something. You said two things when you talked about being beat and how you turned out good, right? As Black men, we have to let go and stop bragging. Survival mode. Survival mode it can't continue to be our bragging rights. Because all we're doing is we're staying in our sympathetic nervous system, which fight, flight, or survival, right? So if we're always in that, I came from the bottom, I get it. I came from the bottom. And now, and then the second piece you said is the motivation. See, that's a tricky one. And it caught me years later, even after doing maybe 10 years of the work and going to therapists and getting all this stuff done, I was still motivating myself from the pain. So if I wasn't hurting, if I wasn't angry, I had no drive, right? So what does that mean now? I have to create the toxic situation so I could get motivated. But what you just spoke to is learn how to be motivated, inspired from the personal freedom. Because see, that doesn't turn off. You don't need to have a toxic situation or a moment that lowers your vibration to feel motivated. You can just wake up that way. Yeah. So those were the two things that I wanted to share. Just put some more emphasis back on that, because I know as Black men, we got to put on that trap music to get in the gym. I get it. But if that's if your motivation, look at that. If your motivation is coming from your hurt and your wound, that's what you're going to keep creating. And you wonder why you're locked up. You wonder why you're fighting with the baby's mom. You wonder why you're drawing this attention to yourself in the streets. Now, I get it. No judgment. But you don't have to live that way. You don't have to continue that story. If you choose, like Michael said, if you don't know where to start, I'd love to talk to you.
Yeah. And it all begins with that first step, that first step and making a choice. Because I will assert that the three most difficult words for any man to say is, I need help.
Right.
Nothing wrong with saying I need help. It is not a sign of weakness. It is the greatest show of strength that you'll ever demonstrate.
Vulnerability
By
is a
simply
superpower.
being courageous enough, because it takes courage. You're gonna have to move through some fear.
It takes a lot. It takes a lot.
But when you do, trust me, what's on the other side is absolutely amazing. I'm a living testament of that. So with that, Mr. Arjuna, man, thank you so much, bro.
Thank you, Michael.
I appreciate you. I love you. I'm glad we've connected. I'm sure there'll be future collaborations.
For sure.
Because nothing happens by accident.
Not at all.
And it's been a wonderful conversation that I'm sure has provided value for my audience. So again, thank you for showing up.
Thank you for allowing your story to be what it has turned into for us, for men like you and all those that are watching.
Absolutely. And it takes all of us. If nothing else, Black men have to learn to collaborate with each other so we can continue our own healing process. Yes. We can't do it by ourselves. So we have to connect with others. So I'm so glad that we've connected. And obviously from my perspective, the reason I created this program was for people like you, who are shattering the stereotypes, who are moving past the media generated narratives about who we are and what we're capable of, because we're capable of doing amazing things. And now it's time for us to step into that and to create that. So again, it's my honor and privilege to have featured you on this particular podcast.
Thank you.
All right, so this has been another episode of Shatter the Stereotypes, and I just want to say, I want to leave you with this simple word, and I want you to not think about it, but I want you to feel it, and that word is freedom. Freedom is what you want, whether you realize it or not. Everything we do in an attempt to feel something, okay? The stuff you buy, all the stuff that you have, we do it because we want to feel something. Well, I'm going to assert that it is possible to feel something that will transform your life. And that feeling is love. I believe that feeling is love. And when we get to that, we connect to that love, which is in my experience, it is the animating force of life. It is what the divine intelligence used to set this whole universe in motion. It's love. And when you connect to that love, that's the sweet spot, baby. That's the sweet spot. So go for the love, not for the stuff. Heal your heart, find out who you are, and life will be awesome. All right, we'll see you next episode. Take care.